I really hope that Kate actually makes that comic accurate mask for Hawkeye at one point and just makes him wear it at least once. Come on, give it to us once. Hello, I'm Phil, welcome to my channel where I like to talk about all the geeky pop culture that I like and consume, and that includes things like the MCU. So we are talking today about Hawkeye Episode 3, which just hit Disney Plus this morning. I forgot to look if there's an actual episode title to this. I'm sure there is. I'm just calling it Episode 3 for now. We start with Echo's backstory. Echo was the character that kind of turned up at the very end of the cliffhanger of last episode, where the Kate and Clint had both been captured by the Tracksuit Mafia, and she seems to be the leader of the Tracksuit Mafia, and we get her backstory and sort of her origin story in a way here, as someone that has always been deaf, as right from a little child. We get to see that she has always been very bright, always been very determined, right from the moment that she, including martial arts training from a very young age. We don't know how old she is here, but I would guess by the look of the actress that plays the young version of her, maybe 6 or 7, something like that. Maybe even younger, but she's a very determined, smart girl, and she has a great relationship with her dad, who we see being very supportive, very kind here, which I really liked, especially when it's then later on revealed that actually he's part of the Tracksuit Mafia, because here he is being a loving, doting father and giving her all this inspirational advice, and turns out he's part of the Tracksuit Mafia. I liked that. We also get introduced, or at least hinted at, her uncle. Her uncle gets referenced a few times in this. I don't think it's a blood relative uncle. I think it's a term of affection type uncle. And here, all we see of him is sort of his shoes and what looks like a bit of a leg. Sort of looks like might be a very imposing guy. This is obviously going to be Wilson Fisk, who in the comic books is helped train Echo. I believe I've never read any comic books with Echo in, I should say, but from what I gather, helped train Echo. So he's a part of her backstory in the comics, and it'll be interesting to see him brought in here. This will be one of the defining moments to say, okay, is this gonna clash with the Netflix MCU stuff, or is it gonna gel with it and not contradict it? We will see. It'll be interesting to see. I can't remember if they've announced the casting for this yet. I can't even remember if they've officially announced that Wilson Fisk is going to be in it. Kingpin is going to be in it. But if he is, really hope it's played by the actor that played him in Daredevil. Even if they change the look slightly, that's fine. I don't think that's continuity breaking. He can look bigger. That's fine. There's rumours about that going around. But I would like them to maybe not contradict the Daredevil stuff. That would be nice. Still haven't seen Daredevil Season 3, actually. Need to get around to that. So we get these scenes when she's younger, but then we also cut to when she's an adult in this sort of pre-title sequence. And she walks in on basically Ronan, a.k.a. Clint, back when he was Ronan in between Infinity War and Endgame, basically butchering all of the Tracksuit Mafia in their headquarters, including her dad. So she comes in, finds her dad dying on the floor, has seen that Ronan was doing this, and that's where her vendetta against him comes from. It gives a great bit of backstory to the character, motivation for the character, I think, rather than it just being like, oh, this guy took it. There's a personal thing there, and I like that. I also really like this scene just generally in the way it was filmed and shot and presented to us, because there was very little dialogue in this, and given that it's a backstory for a deaf character, that worked really well. There was a lot of really atmospheric music, use of sound effects to great effect as well. There was very little actual dialogue in the scenes, and where it was kind of muted in the background almost. So I really like what they did with that there. So after that background information, we then cut back to where we were at the end of the last episode, with Clint and Kate captured by the Tracksuit Mafia, and Echo comes to interrogate them, basically. She wants to know what the connection is with Ronan, and because obviously she's got the vendetta against them. She wants to kill Ronan. So they kind of get interrogated. Hawkeye says that Ronan is dead, and that Black Widow was the one that killed him. And this works kind of like, it's almost not a lie, because in a way Black Widow was the one that found him when he was Ronin and convinced him to stop doing that and come and help them as the Avengers again, as Hawkeye again. So in a way, she was a result. She was the one that killed Ronan, but in a very metaphorical sense. So there's kind of like, it's almost like he's not lying, but he's not quite telling the truth either, obviously, because he was Ronan and he is alive. It's kind of like double-sided thing that works quite well. I loved the action scenes in this episode. The fight scene initially when Echo is fighting, Clint breaks out from his restraints and then ends up fighting Echo. There was some great arrow work there from Clint as well, so showing off his bow and arrow skills. That was great. And then when they're in the car, I loved that car chase scene where they're rushing through the streets. Most of it was filmed from like the back seat perspective, and that worked really well for giving it, the camera would swoop round, look out different windows as cars sort of came up beside them with bad guys in. It worked really well to create a really dynamic scene, and it was really exciting to watch. Then we get the trick arrows as well. All the time while this is happening, Clint, in his initial fight with Echo, had his hearing aid had gotten bust, so he can barely hear anything. So there's some nice bits of comedy where the interaction between Kate and Clint is basically him not hearing her and sometimes repeating back what she's just said as if she hasn't said it because he hasn't heard it, and she's making the same suggestions, or just some kind of bizarre response to what she said because he can't hear her. The comedy works really well there. The trick arrows work in a comedy way as well, because some of them are just bizarre. And I love the fact that we got a Pym particle arrow when he pulled that back, and he'd asked her to shoot an arrow up in the air. As soon as he pulled that Pym particle arrow back and I saw the words Pym written on the side of it, I was like, that's going to be a giant arrow. And yep, giant arrow came back down into the car. Great. A nice little bit of, reminding us that we're in the MCU and in this connected world. Once they've escaped and they've gone back to Kate's aunt's apartment, Clint gets a phone call, which turns out to be from his son, but he can't hear it because he's got the his hearing aid is broken. So Kate notices that this is going on. Clint actually thinks it's his wife calling him because that's the number that's come up on the thing, but he can't hear anything. So she kind of writes down, it's on speakerphone, and she writes down on a pad to show him what the kid is saying. And that's a very sweet moment. We get a nice little bit of the interaction between, a feeling of the bond between Clint and his children, which, again, always tugs on the heartstrings for me. And also, as they're talking about the fact that, oh, will you be home for Christmas? We're going to miss basically talking about missing movie marathon nights. And then his kid sort of says, oh, don't worry, I understand if you can't make it back for Christmas. Again, really tugging on the heartstrings there. I really hope he does make it back. And I predicted last week that this series was going to end in one of two ways. Either Clint's not going to make it back and he's going to die, and it's going to be a very sad ending, or he will make it back and it'll be a happy ending. I'm rooting for the second one. While the first one would be amazing drama, I'm sure, I don't want that to happen to Clint. I want him to get back to his family. And also, while Kate is writing all of this, of course, she's hearing the love between Clint and his son, and how devastated he is that he might not be able to get back for Christmas. And you can just tell that she's really feeling guilty about this, because it's because of her, because she put that suit on, that he is potentially not going to make it to his kids at Christmas. And you can see this is kind of the first time that she's really clocked that, the implications of that for Clint. And it's a moving scene all round, I think, for everyone involved. And then we get the scene in the cafe where she kind of acknowledges the whole situation and how it sucks for him, and she's sorry. Again, he doesn't try and make her feel guilty about it at all. It's not like he's laying on the guilt. He's in fact very understanding about it, and he talks to her about taking on the life of someone who wants to help people in the way that superheroes do, and that it requires sacrifices and you're going to have to give up some things, and is she ready for that? And there's a nice kind of building, it really feels like they're building their mentor student relationship there, and then she brings up the subject of the costume. She's got this strand where she thinks he needs better branding, and he's like, I've spent the last 20 years trying not to be noticed. That I was a spy. Like that was my job. But now she's like, no, you need a better brand, you need a better costume, and she sketches out this little thing, which is basically the comic accurate costume. Nice little nod. We get these things to nods to comic accurate costumes in the MCU. We don't always get them on screen, but we get nods to them, and this is one of them. As I said, it would be really nice if at some point she like makes the mask that he refuses point blankly that he would ever wear, and just gets him to try it on once, even if he then goes absolutely not and takes it immediately off. I just kind of want to see it once. But I suspect by the end of the series we'll have him in the purple, more recognizable costume from the lower head down. And she mentioned a hood, so it'll probably have a hood as well. Kate is still on this train of thought that her new potential stepdad, Jack, is got something to do with all of this, and there's something dodgy going on with him. So they go back to Kate's mum's apartment and use her computer to try and find out some information on some of the, see if anybody's connected to the company that her mum runs, that might also be connected to all this tracksuit mafia stuff. So they put in a name in there. And while Kate is doing that, Clint wanders around and comments on how big this apartment is, and he seems to be quite wowed by how rich she is. I mean, this guy has hung out with Tony Stark. Come on, you must be used to hanging around with really rich people by now. But here he is, wandering around, and then Jack, it is Jack, isn't it? I can't remember now. Jack, the stepdad guy, suddenly is in the corner with a sword and has a sword to Clint's neck, and that is the cliffhanger. Well, obviously, that paints him again in a potential for us audience, framing him as a potential bad guy. But as I've seen elsewhere speculated, I think maybe we're being thrown a red herring here, and all of these things are easily explained. I mean, as far as he's concerned, Clint is just a intruder in his house. So, yeah, he's probably thinking he's there to rob him. So, there are all these explainable ways that can explain every action that Jack has taken. And I think I'm absolutely on board with what I've seen elsewhere. People speculate that Jack is actually innocent and he's got nothing to do with it. It's actually the mum that is the bad guy. Potentially, maybe working also for Kingpin. We'll see. But that's all speculation at the moment. What do you think? Do you think I and others that have said that are right there? Let me know in the comments below. Overall, I'm still really enjoying this series. I'm still loving the Christmas theme. It's just kind of there in the background. You get a few music motifs that are very Christmassy throughout, and there's obviously snow everywhere. When they're doing the car chase, they go through a Christmas tree lot at some point. There's all these nice little Christmas elements in the background that just remind you, oh yeah, it's Christmas time, and it is the 1st of December today, so hey, beginning of Christmas. Nice. I'm loving the action still. I'm loving the interaction between Kate and Clint. I think their dynamic is growing really well, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how Kingpin is going to be introduced into this, because I'm 99% sure that must have been Kingpin, this uncle that they're referring to. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll be back next week for another review. See you then. Goodbye.